Merry New Year, everybody. Happy 2025 to you and yours. Welcome. Although I hope I haven't crossed the line with the Larry David mandate about when one can still wish a Happy New Year. But regardless, welcome to another edition, the first 2025 edition of Thinking Out Loud. My name is Andrew Siciliano. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here. The regular season is over. 272 games have been played. We now have your postseason coming up, marching towards Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans. And just a friendly reminder, it's Super Bowl 59, but we are in 105 years now of the National Football League. Just historical context as we discuss any and everything here. Sam Betesh laughing in the background unnecessarily, yes. but I'm grateful for it. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great, and Happy New Year. Yes, and I think it's okay. I'll stick with if it is the first time you are seeing someone in the new year, go for it. I'd say February probably gets a little weird, but outside of that,
no, February is a little bit too much. But I said Happy New Year to somebody, actually a Browns coach in Baltimore over the weekend, and they looked at me and said, "You ever watch Curb Your Enthusiasm?" I said, "Oh, yes, I have."
Yeah, he's going there.
Yes, I have. He went there.
It's okay.
Anyway, here we are. Also, the day after the regular season, and sometimes, in many cases, immediately after the last game is played on Sunday, for example, decisions are made, and we used to call it Black Monday at NFL Network. We didn't do that. I'm not there anymore, obviously, but a couple of years ago, the edict came down. Like, we don't have to call it Black Monday, do we? Can we come up with a different name? There are some that still call it Black Monday. Black meaning everyone's getting fired. I really hate it. I mean, I enjoyed working those shows because, hey, it's breaking news, and that's what I love doing, the breaking news and everyone coming in from different angles and reporters. And I love all of that. But you also have to remember and consider this as we talk about each of these coaching moves or teams that didn't make moves, is that you're dealing with a person, a human being, a family, a community here. And when you fire a coach, you generally fire the entire staff. When you fire a GM, you generally have to let go the staff as well. Now, does that mean 200 people? No. But it's often dozens of people, because a coach is going to bring with him not only a number of assistants, some of whom may stay, but a coach also brings with him support staff, right? A coach often has a chief of staff or someone that, a lead assistant, if you will, that often has a football background, not just a glorified assistant, someone making travel plans, but, somebody that actually runs the operation for that coach. And it's a massive support staff in every building. I mean, some coaches bring their own equipment guy. Well, I got this guy. Look, so to fire a coach, to fire a GM, you're affecting so many people and so many families and so many kids and so many. Now, you're running a big business. The average fan would say, who cares? Move on. Like, I'm paying my good money. I want to see your team win. The money that flows into a city, look at Detroit, for example, when a team is good and a team is winning, you should overlook the personal side of things, and you're going to run a business and try to get the best return out of your business. Obviously, that is the case, but you need to consider that, when you go on TV or go on the radio or go on a forum like this and talk about a coach getting fired, you're talking about a person, right? Those kids look at social media, right? Like the families, they go to school. It all trickles down. Just consider that before you spike the football, figuratively speaking, on any coach. That just is my little soapbox here. Was talking to a team executive within the past week to 10 days for a team, telling me about how they remember years ago watching news coverage of a coach getting fired. And one of the reporters or one of the hosts, wasn't NFL Network, went, "We got our first one on Monday." And you're like, ooh, ugh, like, really? Like, it's it's uncomfortable, but it is also part of the business. It is a performance business. There's wins, there's losses, and there are results of those wins and those losses. All right. That said, Sam, let's do Mike McCarthy. Okay?
Seems the right place to start.
Seems the right place to start. And the headline on Monday, and as of the recording of this show, which is Tuesday, the 7th of January, 2025, Mike McCarthy is still the head coach of the Cowboys, and I will expect that he will be the head coach of the Cowboys for at least a few more days, if not a few more years. McCarthy's contract isn't up until the 14th. So a week from right now, his contract extends beyond the regular season, just the way it is. So when the Bears call and ask permission, the Cowboys aren't going to answer the phone. They're not going to respond. They're going to send it right to voicemail. They're going to send that email right to the spam folder. Why would you let somebody talk to your coach that A, you still control, but B, more importantly, you may bring back? And I think they will, honestly. Mike McCarthy had 3 12-win seasons, and we went through this with Jason Garrett back in 2020. Well, what do we do? Is he back? Remember, that thing went a full week with Jason coming into the building every week. I don't want to say begging for his job every day, rather, but saying, hey, I still want to be the guy. And they had their meetings and they talked through the future plan. And eventually Jerry decided to move on. Mike McCarthy had 3 consecutive 12-win seasons. If you were going to fire him, you probably should have done it mid-season. And I think most people would have said, okay, that might be the right move. But at this point, if you listen to what Jerry Jones is saying, and I don't mean on that new show about land and oil with Billy Bob Thornton, that was a fantastic acting performance. If you listen to what Jerry Jones is saying when he says, I'm not even thinking about getting rid of a coach, and he's praising Mike McCarthy, he's not getting rid of him. He just isn't. I don't think he is at all. And as I said last week, the issue isn't, do you want to bring Mike McCarthy back? The issue is, do you want to give Mike McCarthy a long-term deal? And what does it look like? Mike McCarthy has the right to say no. His deal is up. So if you bring him back, are you willing to make a 3-year, $30 million? I'm guessing that's the minimum here. Are you willing to make that kind of commitment to your head coach? It's not just, well, he's not getting fired, he'll be back next year. It's his deal is up, friends. You need to make a major financial commitment to that man if you want to bring him back. No coach comes back on a 1-year Band-Aid. That doesn't happen anywhere. Now, some coordinators come in on 1-year Band-Aids. Mike Zimmer came in on a 1-year contract because it was in line with Mike McCarthy's. We're not going to extend you beyond the current contract of our current head coach. So it's a 1-year deal. Now, could you bring Mike McCarthy back but change out the coordinator? Sure. I mean, we've seen crazier things happen. We see that happen every year all over the league. But the decision isn't, do we let him talk to the Bears? No, they're not going to let him talk to the Bears. If they let him talk to the Bears, that means he's out, and they're not going to give him a contract. The decision is, do we give him a long-term deal? And I don't think that math has changed. I don't think Jerry wants to get rid of him. He would have done it already. I fully expect, and this isn't without any inside information, this is just looking at past performance, which might, in this case, be indicative of future results. Sam, I truly do think Mike McCarthy will be back, and I think it's going to be a multi-year deal.
The difference here is you're looking at 3 years or 5 years. I think when you say 5 years, that could potentially scare people. That feels like a date in the future that's maybe too hard to completely wrap your head around, whereas 3 feels a little more fair. I also think there's another important part to look at with this. It's as if Mike McCarthy has his tenure with the Cowboys, and then this season, there's almost an interim Mike McCarthy after Dak Prescott. The after Dak injury is such an interesting part to look at because it skews in many ways what you actually feel about this season for the Cowboys. What you got out of the Cowboys was potentially more than expected. Obviously, the end of the Washington game in Week 18 maybe skews that just slightly with the numbers. But in essence, they played that game fantastic through most of it against the Washington starters. And again, take that one game out of it, even for this conversation. Is what you got out of a fully functional Dak Prescott-led team the season prior what you want out of your coach moving forward? Because this season is skewed by the idea that you got more than you expected out of the parts you had, as opposed to the season before when you're convinced you got less out of the pieces that you had. So it's really interesting. McCarthy did more with less, but potentially less with more if you go back to the loss of the Packers in the playoffs.
If you want to get rid of a coach, the answer or the question should always be, okay, but replace him with whom? Same goes for a quarterback. You want to get rid of a quarterback, okay, but replace him with whom? Now, you don't always have to have the other guy locked in, but you need to have a plan, unless it's just so bad that you're like, this coach has to get out of here and we'll figure this out. And there are plenty of scenarios over the years, even this year, where it's like, it's got to end and then we'll go figure it out. But that isn't what Mike McCarthy is. That isn't what this situation is. They will figure it out. And I don't think Jerry, just listen to Jerry the last 2 months. He does not in any way sound like a man who is so fed up that he's going to blow the whole thing up. And once again, the overriding, you and I were talking about this on the phone. Whenever you consider these coaching things, yes, you have to fire many people and you disrupt many lives, but you also have to hire many people. And that is exhausting. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have to go through it. Like if you need to get better, okay, go through it. But I bet you in situations like maybe Indianapolis or maybe New York with the Giants, there is do we really want to have to go through this again? And other situations where it's simply untenable, New England, Chicago, well, Chicago especially, they decided, yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to go through the process and we're going to reboot again.
Jerry Jones, it's thought of in our minds that Jerry Jones is trigger happy with decisions. But if you look at coaches over the years, that's actually not the case. It is the opposite. He is stubbornly loyal, especially with those who have had any connection to him in the past. If you look at Chan Gailey and Wade Phillips and Jason Garrett, of course. Now, McCarthy doesn't have that previous tie to Jerry the way those other three that were mentioned, but he has been loyal to coaches. He has been overly loyal to coaches. So this isn't that surprising. I think you're spot on in regards to 3 years for Mike McCarthy. I just still ask the question here between you and I, is that the right call when you really think about what you've gotten out of this Dak Prescott-led team? Because many would say, and perhaps it's unfair, not getting to the NFC Championship simply means not enough in Dallas. Not sure if that's a fair marker, but that is the bar. That is the gauntlet that has been set.
I mean, it should be the bar in all 32 teams. The idea that we make it a special bar in Dallas is just media noise. All right. It should be the bar for all 32. You got to get to the national or the conference championship game and the Super Bowl. That is the bar. Period. It's no different in Dallas. They just get talked about on the Screaming Head shows a little bit more, and their owner/GM does a walk and talk press conference or a scrum in the hallway after every game. I mean, that's what you're signing up for. Imagine if Stan Kroenke or Dean Spanos, I'll just do the two owners in our backyard, right? Or imagine if George McCaskey, imagine if Jeff Ross, like, imagine if any of these owners, John Mara, did a scrum in the hallway after every game, and that's on Sunday, and then Tuesday morning did their radio appearance on the local flagship every single week. Can you imagine Matt Eberflus having to go to the podium every Wednesday, because that usually coaches get back on the podium on Wednesday, and have to answer, hey, did you hear what George McCaskey said this morning? If Robert Saleh had to, or Jeff Ulbrich, have to deal every Wednesday with, did you hear what Woody Johnson said yesterday on his WFAN appearance? Live from London, it's Woody Johnson. Now, that's what Dallas has to deal with. Anyway, I digress. Getting to the Giants. So they made some headlines because they didn't fire their coach and their GM. They didn't fire Brian Daboll nor Joe Schoen after a disastrous 3-win season that did not get them the first overall pick because they beat the Colts, or rather they beat the Colts week 17. Indy was fighting to stay alive in the playoffs. Now, this is one where, full disclosure, I would have understood if they got fired. I would have understood it. But when you really dissect it, I don't know that they made the wrong call. 2 years ago, Brian Daboll was the coach of the year, NFL coach of the year. Now, were they wrong in paying Daniel Jones? Yeah, in retrospect. But they thought they had their guy. They wanted to keep Saquon. It was pay one or tag the other. They did it for a year, and then it all fell apart. Okay. They didn't have a quarterback this year. Say, well, we only won 3 games. Well, you cut Daniel Jones mid-season. Now, would you have been that much better if you kept him? I don't know. But you rolled Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock out there in the second half of the year. That has a big part to do with the fact that you only won 3 games. Joe Shane, get rid of him. All right. He also gave you Malik Neighbors, Tyler Nubin, Drew Phillips. Tyrone Tracy was a 6th-round pick. He had a really good draft class. You're going to fire your GM after that draft class? Now, have they failed to truly develop the offensive line? Have they failed to find the quarterback behind Daniel Jones? Were they wrong in paying Daniel Jones? Yeah, I guess so in retrospect. But in the moment, after they had they not only went to the playoffs, they went to Minnesota and won a playoff game. So you bring everyone back. What, you're going to let Daniel Jones walk the next year? No, you're going to bring him back. How do you structure the contract? Oh, quarterbacks are expensive. Daniel Jones wasn't going to take a 1-year contract. You got to pay him for multiple years. It didn't work. Is the coach to blame for some of it? Yeah, maybe. But I don't mind the Giants bringing people back. I truly don't. But I don't know that they get. Look, if they're in the top 10 again next year, as John Maris said on Monday, if I'm sitting here having the same conversation with the local reporters a year from now, then I'm to blame. Okay, well, we'll see next year. But I don't mind this one.
Public opinion is so interesting, isn't it? And not only that, Hard Knocks. We have to admit that Hard Knocks plays some part of it because public opinion.
Go back, I don't think that it does.
I'll say this.
Saquon left. Someone offered him more money. Yeah, okay, he's somewhere else.
But public opinion does play a factor because there is, and how about this? Public opinion sometimes means fan base, but let's lump in media as well. Let's admit that media and fan base plays a part. And often we call that pressure, right? Outside pressures. What does outside pressures mean? That's what it means. It means noise from those that support your program and noise by those that speak about your program. So the Giants all season have been essentially following the Saquon story with the idea that we all watched that decision unfold in a way that made it seem.
I'm so over this one. Yeah.
But it made it seem as if the owner was leaning towards wanting to hold on to Saquon, and the GM knew that there was a certain number that he wanted to hit and not to go above that number, which you would imagine is something they discussed.
All GMs do that. Yeah.
And again,
all negotiations
with the owner and discuss with the owner, hey, we don't want to go past this. And yes, it went past it. Now it went barely past it. And again, then Mara comes in the room and says, I think we were a little timid. And that word seems to fall on the GM not being aggressive. But as you said, nobody would have been surprised if this went that way because of everyone speaking about it week after week, because it wasn't just following the Giants season. It was unfortunately following the Eagles season and the Saquon story as well that seemed to be married to one another, dragging Daboll and Shane down each week with the idea, oh, you could have been that. And you and I have said this many times. Saquon doesn't have this season in New York. The difference in the offensive lines alone makes it a completely ridiculous conversation to even be comparing those two.
I agree with what you're saying. He didn't have the season. He wouldn't have the season in New York. What I'm saying is the Hard Knocks thing is a red herring. Yeah, there are cameras there, and people are privy to the fact that, yes, John Mara wanted to keep him. John Mara has also said that publicly in other forums as well. He wanted to keep him. The GM had a number. The GM didn't do it, right? But the idea that for some reason no one would be paying attention in New York to the season Saquon was having without Hard Knocks is just silly.
No, but to your point,
it had nothing to do with anything.
To your point about Jerry having a press conference and a radio show, Mara does not speak very often. So seeing Mara in that context with Hard Knocks allowed for everyone to hold on to that represented Mara for the entirety of the season in, as I said, the public eye.
Giants fans would still be angry that Saquon is having the season in Philadelphia. Clearly. There would still be banners being flown or planes. What I mean, it would still be the same, in my opinion. There was a camera there. All right. Okay, we know how the sausage is made. And I do think that moving forward, no team will sign. If you want to do an offseason Hard Knocks like that, in all seriousness, you will have to order a team to do it. And generally speaking, teams have final cut as to what gets out there. Here's what I would say. It's on the Giants for letting that get to air.
Probably.
That any team over the years that has done Hard Knocks will tell you that if there's anything that they're not sure about, they just say, "Hey, can we keep that out?" Okay. You know, for example, a couple of weeks ago, you didn't actually hear Joe Burrow cursing at or near really Zach Taylor on the bench. So frustrated with all the false starts and the sloppiness on the offense, you didn't hear that. You didn't actually hear Mike Tomlin dropping some choice F-bombs on the official. You conveniently didn't hear that. I'm not suggesting the Giants should have censored anything. I certainly appreciate the access.
It's great.
But
hurt him in the end. It hurt him in the end. Period. And keeping Dable probably makes more sense to most people than Shea. That's my guess. That in New York, that's what more people are screaming.
Look at Joe Shane's draft class.
You nailed it. You nailed it. And again, that's to say this was a calmer decision than many that we see.
Sure. Let's get to Saquon. I took a lot of heat on Twitter on Sunday when I tweeted, keep Saquon out of the game. They made the right choice. He had 385 touches when you include his 33 receptions, or 378 rather. Just why bother getting him hit again? And then because Twitter or X is obviously a forum for nuance and context and intelligent conversation, I admittedly could have worded it more clearly, but people went after me saying, since when do touches matter in the rushing record? And I said, because I had also said, it's not the record anyway. It's only, it's 17 games, not 16. So then everyone up in arms. Well, OJ, I'm like, who cares? Listen, people, it's very simple. There's a rule of 370 in the NFL. The analytics people will tell you that over the years, if you track running backs, Larry Johnson, for example, or others over the years, that if you have a 370 touch season, your career is over. You fall off a cliff. Just fall off a cliff. Derrick Henry, obviously, is an outlier. Got to see him in person on Saturday night. Second time I've seen him this year. He's amazing. But the idea of giving your back 378 regular season touches and then not getting a bye and then knowing that you could have 4 more games and you could be looking at 450 touches for Saquon when all is said and done. I mean, that's a career ender right there. I'm being dramatic, but you do need to consider those things. So sitting Saquon down when there is a healthy debate as to what exactly a regular season record is anymore in the NFL, 12 games, 14 games, 16 games, 17 games. We're going to get to 18 in a few years, and then everyone will be up in arms again about what exactly a regular season record is in the NFL. I do think there should be 16-game records and 17-game records. And if you want to do 14-game records and 12, do it. I'm all for that. But my point was, this isn't really a record. He got to 2,000 as a nice round number. We have a base 10 number system. But more importantly, sit him down because you want him fresh for a run to New Orleans. Every tackle is a car crash. As I said last week, avoid 20 more car crashes to get him a record, or 25, or whatever it would be. And I'll give you a list of names: Zay Flowers, Christian Watson, Terrion Arnold, Kevin Zeitler, Blake Corum. All those guys played in week 18. Now, those teams were playing for something other than the Rams. Blake Corum really, was out there as the number 2 back because Kyron Williams was sat down because the game was only up for seeding for the Rams. But all those guys got hurt in week 18. And if you have the opportunity to take your most important piece and give him a break when your quarterback is also out, give him a break and let the screaming head shows debate whether or not you're wrong, but feel confident that your running back, who you need to ride to New Orleans, can let his body heal. That was the point I made. And no, I do realize, friends, that touches don't equate in the rushing title. Okay, I could have worded the tweet a little bit better. And when I took it down, I said, hey, I didn't word this well. And then there were people that actually responded, or maybe you're taking it down because you got burned. I'm like, am I gonna respond to all of these tweets and give them the air? No, I didn't get burned. I could have worded it better. My point being, let the guy breathe.
All right, there's Eagles gear sitting behind me in this shot for those watching on YouTube. And I wholeheartedly agreed with you last week in regards to the quote unquote right decision in this. I have since, maybe for purposes of this conversation, but actually, no, I debated within my head what this meant from an Eagles fan base standpoint. And there's a couple of ways to look at this. It is different now. Now that it has happened, now that the game has passed, now the dust has settled, and now that, frankly, you had to deal with what you did on Twitter, which is really interesting. And in looking,
like I said, I could have worded it better.
But in all of that, it made me think of it from a slightly different perspective, which is this. It is the right decision because the other side of it has no win whatsoever. Okay, let's say that, right? In other words, playing him and getting hurt is essentially Sirianni signing away his ability to make a decision like that, maybe ever again in this league. Okay, that's it. So the back flack of this going poorly is impossible to argue for. But I do want to say one thing now that we've slept many nights on all of this. A team wins the Super Bowl every single season. A team breaks the all-time rushing record every, well, let's say it will have been 40 years. So it is a more special mark on history to do this one thing than it would be even if the Eagles are to win the Super Bowl. The other side of that, quickly.
Can I interrupt?
Okay.
Did you just say that getting Saquon the record is more, did I mishear you, is more important than winning the Super Bowl?
No, that historically it will last longer than the one season of being Super Bowl champion.
I couldn't disagree more.
That's fine.
Are they gonna tell stories years from now about that 18th week where they got a few yards against a team that was then at that moment called the Commanders?
And it would be okay, and it will be the Giants that they would have done it against, and that's pretty irrelevant. But
that's absolutely whomever.
It is even more, yeah. But it's even more relevant. It's actually even more relevant that it's the Giants. But
it would be nice in the Disney movie. It is absolutely irrelevant.
Okay, but what about this? Okay, first of all, he would have done it in potentially fewer carries than Dickerson. So when you talk games, it would have been a record. But I'm only saying that it would have stood for 40 years as opposed to standing for one. The other part of it is this. The Eagles had nearly everything in their control to gain this milestone, as opposed to all of the unknowns over the course of what will now have to be 4 games and 4 wins to make this right. In other words, and I'll give credit, Brian Baldinger. I don't know if you were able to watch any of the Jason Kelsey show that was interesting nonetheless. Okay, but what if they now, of course, so they don't have the record, and what if Green Bay or Detroit or any of the other teams in the NFC playoffs beat the Eagles? So therefore there is no record and no Super Bowl championship, or the Chiefs, and even making it to the Super Bowl and losing. In other words, will history look back on this differently? It was in their control more than the rest will.
Because in 2 years, in an 18-game season, Ashton Genty breaks it. Oh, but we always had that Week 18 against a bunch of Giants practice. I mean, come on.
But you're assuming
that's more important than winning a Super Bowl.
It depends.
There's a Nick Foles statue outside the stadium. Yes, are they gonna put a statue of Giants practice squad guys? No,
they could put a statue of Saquon. They still could, by the way. They still could. I truly
can't believe the words are coming out of your mouth.
The likelihood, still, even the percentages are so stacked against the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. Even in this moment, again, it's 4 games they need to win now against. Even just say it. I mean, if it's the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, whoever it is in the Super Bowl, 3 games in the NFC. And then taking down the Chiefs or the Bills, whoever stands in their way in the Super Bowl, that would in other words, I'm asking you a question. Is that the difference? Is winning the Super Bowl the only salve to this? Is that the only salve to this?
No, because this is people have made far too big of a deal. No one, this is such much to do about it. There's no salve. To say that implies that people are so hurt and losing sleep. I mean, give me a break.
Not losing sleep.
The most important thing here is winning, and you have a better chance of winning with a healthy Saquon Barkley. And to keep him healthy, you don't play him. Because freak injuries happen. They could happen next week in the postseason as well. But I'd rather have it happen in the postseason than have it happen week 18 and go, oh, well, I was just going for a record that's going to be irrelevant in 2 years when they expand the season. Anyway, Mike Hall, for example, the Browns' second-round pick, defensive lineman from Ohio State. Get to know him. He is a game wrecker. He suffered a significant non-contact knee injury week 18 in Baltimore. And when it happened, I immediately said, you know what? We could get Myles Garrett out of there. Okay. Now that was just me. That's my thinking. For who, for what? To use Philly parlance? Saquon. For who, for what? Christian Watson running down the sideline. He's now out for the year. Now they were fighting for seeding, but I mean, really, for who, for what? I don't blame Matt LaFleur for playing his starters. The Eagles had 0 to gain whatsoever other that. Can you name the other running backs to run for 2,000 yards?
There have been 9 of them. Adrian
Peterson, the big names.
Derrick Henry.
Do you remember the tails of those 9 as they got near 2,000 or a potential record?
But again, wait. You say potential record. Do I remember Adrian Peterson? Yes, because he ran for 199 in the last game to come up 8 yards shy. So yes, I remember that. And again, you're talking 2000 versus 2106. When you're talking 2105, 2106, that is different because we will remember the Saquon conversation. We will remember this. Yes.
I will remember that it was stupid. I don't mean you are.
No. I know what you're saying. I know.
In general, this entire it is barbershop screaming head nonsense.
And one more actually to add to your side of the argument. This isn't just about putting Saquon on the field because you're talking about Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens and Lane Johnson and potentially Jalen Hurts. And if any of them and Mailata, if any of them are injured in this pursuit, then you are kicking yourself should you lose in the playoffs. My only question to you is, will you kick yourself in the playoffs when and if you lose now that you got not, in other words, you got neither the Super Bowl championship nor the rushing record. That is the debate in my head.
I only care if my team wins. And if my team loses on the way to a Super Bowl, am I going to go, well, in retrospect, I wish I got drunk week 8. I mean, that's what you're basically saying. In retrospect, I wish I had more fun. That's a bad analogy. I take that back. Okay. In retrospect, I wish I went for the record. No, who cares?
It was that. My only question is, it was more in other words, it was more in their control. Yeah. It was more in their control. That was my only thing. It was more in their control.
Nothing is in your control when it comes to the injuries.
Fair.
Injuries are not in your control. They're not. They're just not. You think they are? They're not. You could be running on the field after a TV timeout, right, during the Super Bowl, and your Achilles can blow, right? That happens.
course.
Injuries like that are out of your control. They are. Anyway, so like I listed the other people. Blake Corum broke his forearm. Christian Watson, Terrion Arnold, Kevin Zeitler, Zay Flowers. These all varying degrees of severity there. They were all playing week 18. It's an extra game. Saquon didn't get that extra game. And Nick Sirianni made the right call. Imagine if he got hurt and then they didn't have him in the first round, in the wild card round, and they didn't win because of it. Oh, but Nick, you got him the record. You're fired. But you got him the record. I mean, come on. Anyway, I digress. People have asked me, why did the Rams sit their starters for the most part? Like Steve Avila played. Avila, I beg your pardon. Steve, sorry. This is the conversation. Why? Sean McVay still lost Blake Corum, and that's a big hit. That's your number 2 running back. But he didn't want anyone hurt. Well, I mean, it affected who he played. Okay. He was rolling to roll Jimmy Garoppolo out there and see what he could do. Almost won. Didn't. Lost. Oh, but he could have controlled who he played. Not really. He could have played anyone in the NFC North, any of the 3 teams, or the Commanders. He's already beaten Minnesota. He's lost to the Lions, although that was close week 1. He lost to the Vikings. He knows both of those teams well, as both head coaches were his former offensive coordinators. Doesn't mean you're going to beat them, but like the Commanders, hey, I'd rather probably not want to face Jaden Daniels. He probably thought about that as well, but health is the most important thing here. So I'm going to play to win. Jimmy Garoppolo is a quarterback who a couple of years ago was in a Super Bowl. He could play a little bit. I'll take my chances. And that is what he decided to do. And the idea that he was in control and that being that 3 seed was much more important. I'd rather be the 3 than the 4. But being the 3 didn't guarantee you a certain opponent. It didn't. So he said, I'm going to avoid injuries. And he still lost a significant player. So just want to get that out there because my phone's been blowing up. People think I'm some Rams whisperer or anything. I'll just tell you how Sean generally thinks. And I guarantee you that was his thinking. You know, we had a preseason game how many ever years ago? When I was with the Rams for 14 years, we were in Hawaii. And Sean didn't want to take all those players. You have a 90-man preseason roster all the way to Hawaii. 6 hours over, 5 hours back. Right? What if someone's back locks up? What if, it's a long way to go for a preseason game? He doesn't play anyone anyway. So, obviously, they took enough players and, whatever. But Sean wanted to play a certain linebacker in that game because Micah Kiser was going to be a big contributor. He had missed some of last year, and you wanted to make sure he got enough run in with the green dot and all that. Micah Kiser tore his pec in the first half. Now, you can never avoid injuries, but at that point, he was out for the year, and you're like, why am I doing this? Why am I playing starters in the preseason? It's one of the reasons why the commissioner wants to go to joint practices or do whatever, cut down the preseason. It used to be 4, now it's 3 after COVID. It's eventually going to be 2 because so many coaches think like McVay and go, why am I going to put anyone out there? For who? For what? Let me see the rookies. Rookies get hurt too, by the way. It just happened. Anyway, Sam, that's my soapbox on injuries. Look, the Browns last year played Jeff Driscoll. So, people go, the Browns had 4 quarterbacks last year. They actually had 5. They started Jeff Driscoll in week 18 in Cincinnati in a game that meant nothing. They were locked in as the 5 seed going to Houston. Didn't matter. And they still got banged up, Shelby Harris among others. They still got some dings on the defensive line in that game and other places. It's a violent, dangerous sport.
And if you were looking, by the way, at, quote, win probability or seeding probability throughout Sunday, go back and remember, think about how the Packers and Commanders completely flipped in the end of their games. Also, the Commanders were losing to the Cowboys. The Packers were beating the Bears. Bears had Bears had a walk-off field goal to beat the Packers, and Terry McLaurin caught a walk-off touchdown pass from Jaden Daniels. All of it.
What, seed probability or win probability?
No, I was talking about both. That win probability and seed probability in that
I never
moment.
Look at win. I never look at win.
I know you don't. That's why I'm bringing it up. In other words, to Sean McVay's point about health being more important, there was no guarantee because even the outcomes of those games were going to then affect who he would play. So
Sure.
there was really no argument for doing that in his case.
And
really very little.
When we gave you seed probability last week,
yes,
those are that it's a computer simulation, 1,000, 10,000, 10 million, whatever. But those equations, those algorithms constantly have to be tweaked because they're simulating those games with certain rosters. So if did the seed probability for the Commanders take into account that Jaden Daniels was only going to play a quarter? You know what I'm saying? Did it take into account how many possessions Will Levis would get as compared to Mason Rudolph? Did it take into account that Joe Milton would play the majority of the game and not just the fourth quarter for the Patriots? It is just silly. You can't project anything week 18 because there are so many non-traditional variables. It's
and one last thing.
Impossible.
You pointed out, beautifully laid out what the Rams needed to do to clinch in week 17. How could you not take advantage of the fact that so many things fell your way to clinch a week earlier to guarantee yourself essentially a bye for numerous starters, which you were not otherwise going to get? That was brilliant. I mean, you had to take advantage of that. You had to.
Exactly. Most teams don't have a guy as your number 2 that was starting a Super Bowl a couple of years ago.
And had he hit Emmanuel Sanders in stride, would have won that Super Bowl.
Right. Exactly. Anyway, enough of that. This is our first, it's in the books, edition of 2025. Back later, not today, but another time, with a look ahead to wild card, no longer super, but wild card weekend, which I do hope will be super as it extends into a Monday evening with the Rams and the fighting Sam Darnolds at SoFi Stadium.
And by the way, what a stretch of playoff football. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, when you include college football playoff games as well. It's kind of ridiculous.
There's a game Thursday?
Yeah. There's a Thursday college. Yeah. But the semifinals are Thursday and Friday. Then Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And next week is Saturday, Sunday, Monday, because of course that next Monday will be the national championship. There you go.
Give me a headache. I'll deal with that later. All right. For Sam, I'm Andrew. So